everyone, and welcome back to Mental Health Festival Asia 2022, Pushing Boundaries. So in this panel, we're going to shine the spotlight on Gen Zs and Millennials to answer the age-old question whether they are mentally aware or entitled. I'm Joyce, your moderator for this session, and I have 5 panelists with me on board. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So maybe we can start with Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a hopefully aware millennial.
Hi, I'm Charmaine. I'm a millennial.
Hi, my name is Anthony. I'm a behavioral health coach from Intellect.
Hi, I'm Ron. I'm a Gen Z represent.
Hi, I'm Marcella. I'm a Gen Z.
So there is a lot of talk about how millennials and Gen Zs are different in terms of the selves that they bring to work, right? So on the one hand, we have the millennials who were not born into the internet, but they were introduced to it at some point. In fact, they were born to pagers and Nokia phones. And they went into the workforce at a time when the economy was recovering from a financial crisis. Then on the other hand, we have the Gen Zs who were born into the internet and entered the workforce in another financial crisis. Yeah, so we're just wondering, how will these lived experiences shape the way that they perceive workplace mental health? This is how it's gonna work. I'm gonna give you guys a statement. Just let us know if you agree or disagree and tell us why. Yeah, and after that, we'll get Anthony, our behavioral health coach, to chime in based on his experiences working with different clients on how you can elevate your own personal and professional well-being. Okay, so the first statement is, my career growth is a means to an end. Yes or no? 3, 2, 1. Okay, so everybody rejects this idea. Does anybody want to elaborate on that?
I think because our identities are multifaceted, right, it is very dangerous when we have just one sole ideal that we're all looking to. And in anything that we do, we should always have the support of friends from different contexts, friends, colleagues, etc. And only with a multiple level support group, then we're able to reach what we want to do properly in a more holistic way and not in a very obsessive, very, I need to do this at all costs kind of way, because that's very dangerous to the other aspects of our life.
So does the risk of, this single-mindedness resonate with the rest of the panel?
I think the word growth itself means there's no means to an end, right? Because it keeps on growing, so you shouldn't stop just in a certain level.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Yay.
Okay. What about Anthony? I'm sure from your clients you have seen people who see it as an achievement in itself versus those who as a means.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I will use my client for example, but I would say in general from a psychological well-being perspective, right? So we all have what we call 5 basic needs. So the power need, which is the self-empowerment. We have a fun need. We have a survival need, and we have a need for freedom, and we have a need for love and belonging. And all of us need all these 5 aspects. And it is irregardless of your age. Let's say you at this point of your life, you might want to put more focus on love and belonging, but doesn't mean that in another stage of your life you don't need that. You will still need it. So it is not an end. So in this case, where we talk about career, right? We all need the power. A need for power, a need for self-empowerment, because career brings us a sense of achievement, a sense of satisfaction. As a result, that is very important. But however, we all do develop at different stages of our life. So at some point, maybe when you reach 40, it is like a stage of establishment to 65, and then 65. That's where you actually start declining, where you start disengaging yourself in certain roles that you play. And but then you might play put more focus on other areas. Maybe you want to focus more on your kids, homemaking. It can be still very empowering, bringing up your grandchildren and stuff like that. So you still need that power, but in a different aspects.
Can I ask, in that case, right, would you say that it's actually better to focus on one need first and then try and master that one need, or is it better to spread our efforts across the 5 different needs at the same time?
Each of us, if you base on the 5 basic needs theory, which is from Dr. Glasser, which is based on choice theory, right? Each of us have 5 basic needs. It's human, it's innate innately inside us, but some of us will have higher need for power and achievement. Some of us will have higher need for love and belonging. As such, right, what happens is that, we might need to focus on that a little bit more in order to be satisfied. However, the other needs still needs to be satisfied.
So what happens if you just focus on one?
Wow, the danger is that you can reach a what we call a work crisis state. Where if let's say if your power need, your self-empower need is only dependent solely on work, right, and you lost the job, and that's what happened for some professionals, because this is where they really pour all their energy into it, and then when crisis hit and they lost their job, they go into a crisis state, and there's no other aspects of their life that can meet their need for power, need for self-empowerment, need for satisfaction in their career. That's why just now you mentioned, right, Chris, you said, you can't just focus on one area, you need to focus on other places. Like some people that I know, some clients, they have other areas like art, that they're really passionate in, and they will want to paint and then to sell their painting, but it's not their real job. Their day job is something else, like an admin or manager or something, but this is their side job, it's a hassle, and they enjoy it, and it meets their need for power.
Okay, it's interesting that you mentioned side hustle, because actually in a survey that was recently done by Milieu Insight, they found that at least 89% of Singaporean employees feel an inner pressure, to work harder and harder. So whether you see career growth as a means or an end, it doesn't change the fact that you are bound to spend at least 8 hours at work every day. So the next question that I have for you guys is, do you feel that there is a pressure for you to have a side hustle? So this could be investing, this could be like a side business, it could be like a part-time job, freelance gigs, Will you agree or disagree that you feel a need to have a side hustle outside of work? 3, 2, 1. Okay, interesting. So maybe we'll start with Shamin first. So Shamin, you disagree with the statement. Can you tell us a bit more?
So I don't believe that you need to earn a living from every hobby you have. I think there's a joy in just having it as a hobby, and you just like to do that for fun. For example, I love to bake, and my goal with everything I make is for a comment to be like, oh my God, you can sell this. This is sellable. This is the ultimate compliment to me. And I have gotten, people ask me can I buy it from you and everything. And the anxiety of just making sure that I meet a certain order and all that kind of stuff weighs the joy in baking. And hence the pressure of having a side hustle for everything that you do well, it shouldn't be there. I mean, I don't think it should, because it does sometimes take the joy out of it,
But at the same time, it's like once we become adults, it is programmed in us to see time in terms of opportunity cost, right? And that's why people feel the need to sort of monetize their hobbies. So what do the rest of you think about this?
Yeah, definitely I feel that way too. Actually, I'm on the same page as you. Just that, I guess, as a Gen Z, I guess, according to the pressures of the economy and stuff, that we always have this pressure to commodify our hobbies or commodify our time, and make sure as if everything that we do has, I guess, a financial aspect to it. Instead, sometimes what happens is that we don't see the psychological or emotional kind of benefits to it, and that is lost in the process. And I think that's really, I guess, one of the tragedies of I guess, hobbies in the modern world. I don't know about you as a Gen Z.
I think I agree with both of you, but where I'm coming from with my opinion on I'm pressured to have a side hustle, it comes from a place where I feel like I need more certainties. Because I think when I enter the workforce 6 months after COVID happens, and I remember feeling very vulnerable at that time, I might just lose my job anytime, and I feel like the importance of having a side hustle as my backup plan if anything happens to my full-time job.
Correct. And I think that a lot of my cohort as well, they are into freelancing, the gig economy and stuff, right? So there's this whole talk about multiple streams of income and what happens if one fails, and I guess we've kind of bought into that. I don't know if you feel that way as well, but buying into that idea of earning more money instead of like maintaining it from one source or constant source of income has led to this commodification. And honestly, the goal is for me is to have a job which can pay the bills, enough for me to have, I guess, a side hustle which I don't have to worry about commodification. But in the meantime, I guess there is always that constant pressure of monetizing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been seeing so many videos on TikTok. Like when I'm just idling around and scrolling TikTok, right? Then they have these videos where like, oh, do you know that you can actually be making templates on Canva and earning 5 digits a month?
Yeah, like Photoshop templates.
Yeah,
right?
and then meanwhile I'm like, oh, I'm only using Canva for like fun stuff.
So I had another thought in my head actually, which is a little bit, I mean, it's not as relevant to what you're saying, but as somebody who is slightly older than you,
The age card has emerged. But go on.
respect your elders. No, I do think that, for me, the reason, I actually started investing last year, and the reason for that is that I realized I was getting older, so I had time to make up on, right? In my 20s, I wasn't really like interested in money and things like that. I was interested in having fun, right? So that was when I realized, okay, I need to take it seriously, right? Because getting old, things start getting real lah. So the other point also is that the employee loyalty is not as strong anymore, which is something that you alluded to as well. And we don't know when we'll be let go, right? As compared to our parents' time, the boomer generation, where they kind of have a job as stable as the civil service for some of them. And we don't know for sure that we'll have a job, especially when you don't know how the economy is going to do. So that's also partially why, the insecurity there is partially why so many of us, in my opinion, are looking outwards for more security, for ourselves to, with our own hands, build that security.
I don't know if like it's relevant, but I think quiet quitting has been a trend recently, and like it's basically like doing the bare minimum in your job as you use the time to like focus on other things, or maybe even find a new job or a new like monetizable kind of side hobby lah. I think that I don't know, like what do you think about like quiet quitting?
I think quiet quitting has been there for a very
Right.
long time. It's not something
only
new.
Now it's like
I think
like
we just
a
found
name
a
to
nice,
it, right?
nice name for it. I mean, there's nothing wrong in like quiet quitting. I think that there's certain times in your lives where the job is just a job, and there's no need to perform so well to get like the best bonus or anything like that, because there's so much more to life, and you might need to focus on other things in your life that you can't focus on your job. So I don't think there's any shame in quiet quitting. I think, but yeah, it's definitely not something new.
So I'm hearing that a lot of the feeling of needing to find a side hustle, it actually stems from instability, and quiet quitting is a product of acting on that compulsion to find all these other side hustles, right? So when we want to talk about like personal well-being, yet at the same time there is the whole concept of toxic productivity. So how do we reconcile these two things?
This toxic productivity is also the part that, you constantly feel that if you're idling, you are not being productive at all. And then you start blaming yourself, am I not doing anything at all? Constantly engaging in that doing, trying to do things that is good enough, meaningful enough, then we get into that burnout mode. Then my question for my client would always be this statement, when is good enough good enough? When do we stop? When do we take a break? When do we rest? Yeah, I think it's for all of us to think about.
Do you actually encourage people to have side hustles? Because in the back of my mind, I agree with what you said, like when is good enough. But then at the same time, when I'm just doing one job, I feel like I'm missing out on something that could potentially be a backup plan for me in the future that I might need it. So it keeps on fighting between like the two statements.
Yeah. So I would say, how does that side hustle meet your needs then? You have to first identify how it meets your need. If in a current job setting, it is a survival need, for example, you want to earn, you want to meet your daily needs for the 3 meals and stuff like that. Then this side hustle, is it also for that? Or is it for something else? Because remember, we talk about the need for balance. Yeah, although yes, your need, you may have a higher need for survival, for example, and so money is very important to you. But how about your need for freedom, your fun, and then your power and love and belonging. And sometimes I had clients who told me this, and that is because I'm so focused on my work. When I look back, I forgot that I have my family behind me. I don't spend enough time. And that is the unmet need for love and belonging. And it's quite sad because they can, when they look back, they will just break down and say like, no, I'm so focused on this that I missed out so much there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a concept that it's kind of related to this that I've read about recently is kind of like not living in the present. When you kind of spend time, a lot of it is either in thinking about your past, or for us, a lot of us, we have worries about the future, right? We kind of forget to experience the present.
Yeah.
And I read that it was described as like an endless cycle of like delayed gratification.
Yes.
Yeah, and as a result, all of our the other needs are kind of like left out of touch.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like, because I'm hearing a lot about future proofing, or maybe what you call survival mode, ensuring that we will have the financial stability, we will stay employable in this very volatile economy, right? So when it comes to a client whose need is to have stability, right? Then how do you quantify how much stability is enough stability? What are some ways for them to draw the line,
Yeah, which is what I just now asked, when is enough? When would you be really satisfied? And the thing is, with a lot of my clients, the challenge is that they couldn't even answer that, So then, are you going to constantly chase after something that you can never quite satisfy? Then isn't that very tiring?
I think the very interesting part of it is that we have very clear ideas of what the past and future are. Like the past is, we learn lessons from the past. Right? The future is, we need to plan for the future. But the present is just gone. Which is why we don't think so much about it as well. Yeah. Because we have frameworks for the past and the future, but not the present.
Yeah, which I guess the mindfulness movement is sort of like the framework for the present, especially given that a lot of people have to be stuck at home in the past 1 year. That's like the greatest learning opportunity of that framework, in a sense. I think what is insightful for me is that just now when Chris mentioned that in our 20s, we are focused on having fun, that's something which resonates deeply with me. And it seems almost as if this need for financial stability creeps in towards the end of our 20s. But yet for their generation, there is that very real possibility that they may be let go of. Yeah, like 6 months into the job. Yeah, whereas like, let's not even talk about the baby boomers generation. Even for us, when we started out, there is more or less like certainty that we will be there, that the job will be there for us, unless like we really mess up real bad, and then that's on us, right? Yeah, so I think their generation is sort of like forced to grow up like maybe 6 or 7 years in advance. So it sounds like whether it's a question of personality, generation, or developmental stage, a big part of going to therapy is going to be asked very difficult questions that might potentially cause you to melt down. But at the same time, it's also these questions that would help you gain deeper insight. Right? So far, we've talked mostly about personal well-being. Now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about our professional well-being. More specifically, how comfortable do you guys feel talking about your mental health at work, be it with your coworkers or with your managers? Okay? So, given a statement, I feel comfortable talking about mental health at the workplace. Will you agree or disagree? 3, 2, 1. Oh, so all of you feel comfortable. This is quite surprising for me.
Yeah, it's just a surprise for me too, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I ask this, if you don't mind me ask this question, in what context are you comfortable to share about your mental health?
Current place I'm in, the current company, is very open to sharing about mental health, and hence, because of that, I've opened up quite a bit at work, and I didn't. In a way, it feels very safe, and hence that's why. Which what you said earlier about how you need to feel safe resonated with me, but I was in a previous company that it didn't feel safe. The fact that I've experienced both sides, I've realized that there's a lot that comes from like just feeling safe in that space. Be it in the company like at work or even with friends. Like as long as you're safe, you're able to share.
So how does this safety translate into your functioning as an employee? For example, after you open up more, how is your behavior changed before and after?
I mean, I'm definitely more appreciative of this company because I know it's not, you don't get this everywhere. So that's one thing. But I'm able to at least not put things aside and address certain things. So that openness has helped me just be better at work, you know? Yeah. I don't know whether that answered the question, but yeah.
I just wanted to add on to that. I think like element of safety is definitely like one of the most important things. Like for me also, there's also this element of connection between the people, whether it's between the employees themselves or employees and the managers. And I don't know, like I guess it could be the safest like company in the world, but if I don't feel connected to the people around me, then I guess I wouldn't even feel a need to share. Yeah. Right. And I guess that also plays into safety somewhat, because if I don't feel connected to someone, I always have this barrier in front of me. And I think that encouraging people to share and to connect, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you took a chance and shared it with them, and that you found a company that makes you feel safe and accepted. So I think this feeling of being accepted is very important to bring your best self to work. Would you say that that's something that you resonate with?
I agree when you mentioned the word connection. So I think it's not fair to judge the company, but then again, it depends on who you work with, and who you work with depends on how good you're connected with that person. For me, luckily, my manager and my colleagues, I feel safe talking to them. I think the last time I mentioned was like I had a breakdown because I was like homesick, and they're quite acceptance to it. They accept me fully, and it just makes the whole working environment more human. I don't have to constantly be perfect, because just like any other sickness, right? If I'm not feeling well, I will tell them that I'm not feeling well, I need some rest. And that's the same when I'm not feeling well mentally. I mean, there's a lot of debate into this, but I feel like I can be open about this. It's not that I'm not gonna do my job now. I just feel like I need more time to gather myself and put in more effort on that day to do my work like normally.
And what are some ways in which your colleagues or managers respond that actually make you feel supported?
They just respond not like a colleague, but as a friend. And I think that's what makes my team as a safe place for me to express my mental health and my mental well-being at that moment. So instead of they don't even bother talking about work. They would just like how you would respond to a friend, you know, like how can they help, or what do I think would make me feel better.
And there's also a very important step, and that is our own willingness to work on our issues as well. I mean, the therapists can be the best therapists ever, but if you go there because somehow you are forced to go there, or for whatever reason, maybe they say that there's something wrong, you need to go there, or your parents or whatever is it, then that's not coming from you, and then there will be a lot of second guessing the whole process. Then that's not going to help, because if there is doubt, there is mistrust, then relationship don't happen. Yeah.
Okay. So earlier you guys mentioned that when you have been open and candid with your colleagues and managers about days where you may not be feeling your best, and they have been accepting of it. So the next question is going to be on concessions that we make for people, right? I think there is a group of people in the workplace who feels that you need to have a diagnosis to prove that, you are depressed, you experience anxiety, for you to be able to gain that understanding, from your co-workers and the management. So do you agree or disagree that concessions should only be made if employees are clinically diagnosed? 3, 2, 1. So all of you feel that a diagnosis is not required.
Actually, even for the previous question, I was thinking that, we're not robots, so we have like ups and downs. Yeah. And sometimes because of that, when we talk to colleagues, when we talk to managers about mental health, it is not purely for, belonging. Sometimes it's really as a negotiating thing. Like you need to explain to them that I'm not at my best this week, next week, previous week, whatever. And you need the understanding as well, right? So the way I interpreted the question also was, are there circumstances where you are comfortable doing that? And for me, it's always going to be, there will be a point where I can be pushed to I need to talk to somebody in the workplace about this, otherwise I'm suffering alone, right? Yeah. Sorry, what's the question again?
Just how important is a diagnosis in, showing understanding for underperformance?
Right. I think the argument for yes is that we're scared of people malingering, right? Talking.
Malingering.
Yeah. Whereas now we are in a more multifaceted world, and we realize that it is not binary. It's a spectrum. It's continuum, right? And the best of me today may be slightly worse than the best of me tomorrow, right? And the worst of me today might be slightly better than the worst of me tomorrow, right? So I think there needs to be a culture of trust between, among the workplace, but the culture of trust also should not be abused by people. But that's, of course, a very hard thing to define.
Because it is a very chicken and egg pattern, right?
Yeah.
You have that culture, you know that people will not abuse, therefore you can expand it. More people can access this benefit.
I guess I'll say that in essence, a diagnosis to me is essentially like a box in a sense, where people's experiences are put inside this, I guess, category. And actually these are quite important in kind of giving us a guideline of what the condition could actually be. Like for me, specifically when I was diagnosed with OCD, it's actually kind of a connecting the dots moment. But in essence, when we limit, when we contain human experiences to these kinds of boxes, right, it can be quite limiting, not only because of the stigma associated with them, but also that people often have misconceptions about what these conditions actually are. And as a result, they have their own stigmas and stuff. And then on one hand, the employer may not actually want to disclose that they have these conditions because of these stigmas. And also another point which is relevant to the diagnosis, I guess, conversation is that it may not be actually accessible by everyone, especially to people who are, let's say, maybe they're poorer, or they don't have access to good, I guess, medical care, or they don't know how to access good medical care. As a result, they can't get the most accurate diagnosis. And if we limit healthcare or office care based on diagnosis, eventually some people will be limited from that conversation as well.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Because, going to therapy is so expensive. So it's sad to say, but it is a privilege to go to therapy. I think that there are circumstances, I feel, when a manager would know why you can't perform at your best because of certain issues or certain things that have come up. So I think having that trust is very important. And
So I think we're all aligned on the fact that mental health is a spectrum. It's a continuum rather than you're either positive or you're not, right? It doesn't work like that, right? So what can employers or managers, what do they have to understand about this spectrum and this continuum? What are some of the milder, lower in severity sort of distress?
Yeah, how does company comes in to support all this? I would say the awareness, I would say really the awareness. And it is very important, and I would stress this, that companies need to be educated about mental health and how to do mental health first aid, which means a colleague maybe who is frequently always engaging. Suddenly this colleague start to be a little bit more aloof, start not to go for lunch with you, then something must be wrong, right? And then after you observe 1 day, 2 days, still not going, then that's where we go and approach this person and say, what is happening? And have a conversation. And mental health first aid is all about that. In fact, when I do that kind of training, I always stress not just mental health first aid. It's also about asking the most difficult question. When you are suffering, when you are struggling like that, have you have any thoughts about ending your life as well? Because oftentimes, I think what Chris mentioned, sometimes it's that struggle, and then we start seeing ourselves as the only one in this world that is struggling these very unique circumstances. And when you start thinking that way, your mental health spiral, and then you will start thinking about, maybe I should just end it all, which can actually be prevented because studies have shown, when people are in that state, all they want is a person to reach out to them and say, how are you, really, are you having such thoughts? Do you need help?
So I'm hearing that the greatest danger of seeing mental health on a diagnosis basis is that it actually stops us from extending help in a more generous manner.
Yeah, being human.
And in that process, a lot of the signs get missed and a lot of things, they get swept under the rug. And by the time that we find out, sometimes it's in the papers, it's already too late. Yeah. So with that, I actually have one last question. Gen Z and millennials are more entitled than Gen X and baby boomers. Agree or disagree? Have a think in 3, 2, 1. Okay, then I guess we'll go and run first then.
Okay. So what I think of it as is that this entitlement comes along with the general acceptance of mental health. And so in a sign, right, it's a sign of people taking this new form of acceptance, right? And I guess like being, maybe being entitled with it. Yeah, so, or maybe like trying to extend more concessions than what is like maybe detrimental to other people in that sense. So to me, actually this entitlement is a good thing, yeah. So it's a sign that we recognize that mental health is important, just that only a small, in generalize, that small segments are making it a bit more entitled, having a bit more entitlement, which makes it, I guess the rest of us the reasonable concerns of the rest of us make it more accepted in society. Does that make sense?
So you mean to say that normalization and entitlement are two sides of the same coin? And
yes.
Only with a reasonable amount of entitlement can we move the needle?
Something like that. And with any movement towards normalization, right, to me, there'll always be, I guess, some form of entitlement or overreach. And then when we rein that back in, and say, actually, no, maybe we shouldn't be as 150% accepting, then we can actually have a more reasonable and kind of like, otherwise people will just take mental health as a joke. Like, people who will always think that mental health is a joke they won't have their minds convinced unless we rein it back in as a people on the mental health, the pro-mental health side.
Okay, what about our millennials on the panel?
I think that across generations, not just millennial, Gen Z, boomers, what's before that? I have no idea. Pioneer, PG. I think that we all have very similar innate desires, right? Things like self-respect, right? We all want that. It is how we show that we want it that matters. For boomers, it is working hard at your job. That's how they achieve that self-respect. For us, it is our minor interactions with friends, like being, for Gen Zs, being called the correct pronouns, right? For some Gen Zs, right? For millennials, maybe it's, being respected monetarily or in different ways. But that's, all of us, I think, converge on the same basic desires, the same basic wants. And it is only the definition of the symptoms of what we want. That's what people are calling entitlement.
I think as a society, there's a lot of unlearning that we do as we move along with each generation. And I think that with each generation, we're unwrapping a lot more. So it seems like I agree with your statement, it seems like it's entitlement, but actually we're just more self-aware and, with everything. So I think what it seems like, this trend of mental health awareness and all that kind of stuff, these problems have existed way beyond us. It's just that we're now more comfortable talking about it. And obviously we're putting boundaries to where we want to, we're not going to work so hard because there is rest involved in having to keep up with the productivity levels. We all know that now. So I think it's just unlearning things, and it will go along and we'll learn more stuff, and there'll be more learning and unlearning to do, So I think as we evolve, this will continue to be a conversation. Yeah.
I think entitlement on its own has quite a negative connotation, also because of the way that the reputation that the word has gained on social media over the years. But I think it would be fair to say that our generations, both sides, have higher expectations when it comes to, or maybe different expectations when it comes to what we want from our employers, from our workplaces, from our managers. So how then do we straddle this emotional awareness and resilience? How do we take ownership of our own growth?
That's a tough question. I think for me, it comes back to asking yourself, what do you want again? Yeah, because do we then again want to chase after something that, like what Charmaine says, societal norm, right? Or do we want to chase something that is really, we are really innately motivated for, like, for example, art. Art is not going to bring money, but art is what I'm going to be passionate about. Then how do I capitalize that? That brings a sense of satisfaction to our life. That's being self-aware. Yeah, and another thing is that being okay not to be okay. Whether because I mean today in this panel, it just so happened that we are hearing a lot of people that you guys are all okay not to be okay, but in my work actually, and in many scientific journals, stigma is still, and in the recent one actually, in a 2020 paper, people are still saying that it's a shame to come out to tell people about their mental health struggles. And so this is something that I think while we are more aware, there still remains that stigma that people don't understand, because not many of us actually have that lived experience of mental health. And if we don't have, then we start thinking about it in a very different light. And I remember a conversation that I had with a client who told me that when his friend told him about his struggles, and then he started saying that you shouldn't be thinking like this. And then when he himself were in that state where he was traumatized and all, and then he started going into depression, and when somebody said that, and that's when he was like, oh, that's how they felt. When I said that you shouldn't be feeling like that, I was feeling like so angry. I feel like I wanted to just give him a tight slap. So that was what he says, and that is still again, a lot of times we just want to fix the problem, put in the plaster, while not being aware that hey, while doing that we are actually causing more harm at times. And that is where again we talk about the connection, right? Everyone needs to feel that this society has human beings walking around, and that people are humane enough to go and approach other people and say that how are you and stuff like that. And so which is why actually one of the core thing about resilience is also about connection. We have to make that connection. And we all need that connection. We are all humans, we are social beings, we can't really live alone. Or, maybe somebody would want to prove that likewise, but it's very difficult. Yeah, and that provides a safety net. So for us to fall back. So there's these two questions there. One is awareness, the other is resilience. So you probably, but they come back to the same thing, that is connection, that is being human, that is basic needs that needs to be balanced, and asking yourself, which need is what need are we meeting at the very end of the day. That's what I have for you guys.
And for the rest of you, a word for anybody from Gen X or the baby boomers generation watching this, what would you like them to know about workplace mental health?
Mental health at work and the advocacy for that is here to stay, in the sense of, like, now knowing that, you know, it exists in this company, when I look at other jobs, that's actually one of the most important things that I actually ask for. Like, what's your view of it? Because I can't imagine not being in somewhat of the same environment as I am right now. So in that sense, like, it is important, and I think it will like, you know, start to get more and more important to a lot more people, especially once they've experienced it in a company. Yeah.
There's a Chinese saying, right? The earlier men plant the tree, the later men get to rest in it. And the purpose of the saying is that, you know, what people before us have done is to build a future for people after them to really enjoy. Without the predecessors, without the ancestors, there's really very little that, you know, the next generation can do to enjoy. And when this kind of a scenario happens, we need to realize that what we see as work, what we understand as work and hard work changes, because in the past it was physical labor, right? And now it changes to like mental labor, like working at computers every day. So it is different generation by generation. I'm pretty sure that in 20 years, we'll be the ones looking at our kids and being like, you know, you guys should be working harder. But I think what's important is that we are able to take a step back from our lived experiences, try to speak to the next generation, whoever you're mentoring, you're managing, or your children, and try to really understand why is it they're doing what they're doing, what drives them, and how, if there's any way, you can help them reach there or reach the next step. Because that's sometimes that's just what they want from you, right? And if they're able to get it from you, both of you prosper, both of you do better together. Yeah.
I think it's just a collaboration learning that I feel like we learn a lot from the previous generations on how to work hard. And I feel like this is just one of the subjects that they probably need to learn from us. And I don't know, maybe it's an Asian culture thing that it's probably hard to learn from the younger generation because we educate you. Who are you to tell us what to do? But I feel like this is actually just one thing. I believe there are so many other things that you can learn from the younger generations. Like I would probably have things that I'll probably need to learn from my future kids because they're probably more advanced in more things, and I should just be open to it. And I should just tell myself there are things that are probably completely different from my world now that I should be open to learn about. Yeah.
So I guess on my end, I was really thinking about this whole idea or conversation like between, I guess, people like senior leaders and people in positions of power that Gen Zs and like millennials, they are like softer or like weaker. And I kind of just, from what I've seen, and I'll just put forth this stance that maybe it's not that we are softer or weaker, but more of the fact that we are less willing to put up with stuff that we shouldn't have to put up with. Yeah, and like reframing that in that sense helps to kind of see or empathize with what we are currently seeing right now, because the extent of like the struggle that we are facing is kind of different from what other people have faced like in the past. And knowing that, having that in mind, and just kind of like disproving yourself of the notion that people are more, like a group of people are more inherently weak or more inherently soft is much more helpful to the conversation than just assuming or like attaching this label to just a whole entire demographic of people.
Okay, so I really like what Ron said about how it is not about who is stronger or weaker, who is softer, more resilient, right or wrong, better or worse, but really it's just about what is helpful and what is unhelpful. Because at the end of the day, it's not like Gen Z versus millennials, nor is it us versus our predecessors, as we call them, because we are all on the same team. And what I'm hearing a lot on this panel is the importance of learning and unlearning. Okay, so a big thank you to everyone on this panel for being part of Mental Health Festival Asia 2022 with us. And to our viewers, thank you for being part of this experience with us as well. And we have a next session coming up with Sheila Sim. It's going to be about overcoming the hard truths of motherhood with conscious parenting. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.